You've got all these corporations saying they're speaking the woke, they're reading from the woke hymnal, or from the woke, they're singing the hymns of the woke, right? They're in their pew spouting the prayers of the woke. And yes, if you think you're resistance, that's hilarious to me, right? Obviously, because you're not resisting anything, and it's not stunning and brave to say, I'm against racism. Like, good for you.
Yes.
Right? Nice job, Melissa Milano. You're against racism. How brave of you. But, you know what? A lot of people wonder, like, why the hell are corporations doing this? This is a question that Mikey had. He was like, I don't understand. Why are corporations, like, it seems like they're pushing for bigger government, they're pushing for socialism, and they're even pushing this, like, race wars. Like, why do they want this? Why would a large corporation do this? It seems, aren't they capitalists? That was Mikey's question. Aren't they capitalists? And I want to address this because there's a few reasons that I think this is, and I think maybe not everyone sees corporations for what they are and the CEOs of corporations. First of all, you've heard the phrase "design by committee," and we all know that's not a good thing, right? You don't get good, basically anything by committee.
Like comedy by committee. Great example.
It's really bad, right? Well, public corporations are run by committee. Keep that in mind. They are a board, and that board votes. And yes, they put a CEO in place, and that CEO is the, you can look at them as a mini authoritarian in the company with control, but really their hands are tied by the board. So first of all, right from the get-go, they're not these corporations aren't these ideological entities that are like, we're capitalist and we believe blah blah blah. And like, that's not, they're committees. Second of all, they're pragmatists. They're committees of pragmatists. They just want to make more money as a corporation. That's generally their rule, unless they've been converged upon by social justice warriors, in which case they will actually change their goal to propagating this mind virus. But in general, they just want to make more money, right? And so let's talk about a few things. One of them is these corporations are part of a corrupt monetary system, especially large public corporations. And there is a wealth gap in this country. There is a growing wealth gap in this country. Now, there's nothing wrong with a wealth gap, like theoretically, right? However, it does create unrest. And there is something wrong with a wealth gap when it's obtained through coercion. And the wealth gap
and corruption.
Right, corruption's I would say a form of coercion, and when the government's involved, right? So the wealth gap that you're seeing now is actually maintained. Not all of it, but a lot of it is actually maintained through coercion. And I've talked about this previously, and we don't have to get into the Federal Reserve, but we have a banking system that is in bed with the government through the Federal Reserve and the structure of our monetary policy. And the rich elites get money before you do. They get to spend it before price inflation has occurred. They get to socialize their losses and get bailouts. So there's an incentive to keep the system going for the people in power. You can think of it as a proto-oligarchy, right? This is the way that they can maintain power, is to maintain this corrupt system. And that includes, by the way, not just the monetary policy, but regulations. And I've talked about this before, but we have a lot of new people on the show. Large corporations love being regulated in general. And I know that's counterintuitive, but what corporations are afraid of, what ensconced big players are afraid of, is young upstarts that do a better, more efficient job and steal market share and grow to kick their ass. How do you stop an upstart from doing that? You burden them with regulations. Now, that's not something a company can do without the government's help, right? A company can't pass regulations. Facebook can't just say social media companies must do blah, 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 blah. They can't do that on their own, but they can with the government. They can get the government's help to do that, and that locks out competition. And it's one of the most effective ways to lock out competition is to have a tight relationship with regulators as a large company, because a large company can afford Teams of lawyers. Facebook, if meeting regulations cost $150 million a year, Mark Zuckerberg can sneeze that. He doesn't care. It's fine. They can pay it. Can two guys in a garage with a Facebook competitor pay that? Never.
No.
Right? So they will stop regulations stop competition. There's also something called regulatory capture. Regulations are often written by people from the industry because they need, quote, experts. So they get absorbed by the government, write the regulation, go back into the private sector to help have a relationship now with the regulators. It's very incestuous. And the regulatory agencies are in bed with the companies that they regulate by, I would say by design, but like by default, it has to be that way. And so this idea that they are somehow capitalists that are just trying to be capitalists, they're pragmatists trying to make money and secure their position of power. That's what they're trying to do. And a tool available to them is the government. It's a major tool available to them. And so that's why they want bureaucracy, and that's why they want regulation, and that's why they're not afraid of more, quote, socialism. Even in the socialism that people are talking about, no one's talking about nationalizing the Amazon.
Competition, just for my little mind that gets turned off by all this stuff.
Sorry.
It keeps competition at bay, and it keeps them in a position of power.
Yeah, because no one's talking about actually like nationalizing Facebook, right? They're talking about regulating them, which makes Facebook like a default monopoly. That's a great position for Facebook to be in, right? So they're behaving in sort of pragmatic ways that keep them in power and keep them funded, right? They want money and power. Okay, so why support disruptive social movements like Black Lives Matter? Well, and the riots. Well, they need us to be fighting each other because otherwise. Remember Occupy Wall Street? That was a threat to them because what started to happen with Occupy Wall Street was you had people on the right, you had Tea Party kind of like people and socialist people both going, hey, something's fishy about this Wall Street relationship with the Federal Reserve and the government generally. And like suddenly two sides were kind of saying like, yeah, there's something real here, right? And yes, libertarian people were saying, they had different solutions, but they were recognizing a common problem. We can't have that.